Thank you for the honour of inviting me to speak to you all today. It has been challenging to consider what I might talk about this evening, and thus I hope the following, which seems to me to be a kind of reflection on the title, offers you at least some coherence and points for discussion. From victimhood to empowerment. I am deeply conscious of how much the world has changed since I suggested the title of this event. It is as if the plight of the Jewish people will find no rest, and remaining resilient, as every moment brings a new horror story, we have no choice but to go on. But is this living? Why for millennia has this hatred existed, and now more dangerously than ever before? I am aware that exposing my subjective position could alienate me. However, it is a risk that I'm obligated to take. I do not want to be a bystander. The events of the 7th of October last year has been described as the worst assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It is. But we must be extremely careful because unlike the Second World War, the whole world can see, second to second, moment to moment, the atrocities that are taking place. There is no place to hide, and as a result, anti-Semitism has reared its head on a global level. This should not be a Jewish problem. It is, after all is said and done, a human one. On revenge, the Torah, the Jewish Bible, states in Exodus, "But if there is harm, then you shall pay. Life for life, eye for eye, wound for wound." It did not suggest that this requires the value of a Jewish life to be roughly 30 times higher than a Palestinian one. The loss of an eye would only make the whole world blind to that which really matters: human values, compassion and tolerance, not hatred. We all bleed red. The world has been dealt yet another mighty blow, where humanity has been distorted into retaliation and revenge, measured in bloodshed and numbers. My heart is ripped with despair by the suffering that has been and continues to be inflicted on innocent people on both sides of the fence. I fear for the state of Israel, the hostages, and the regime that seems hell-bent on destroying not only its enemies, but itself too. Mostly, I fear for humanity. We face another diaspora, but this time the choices of where one can go to live in peace have become an increasingly unanswerable question. Just yesterday, my mother, Anita Lasker-Wallfisch, said to me, "It's all happening again." And as her daughter, I cannot reassure or deny what we are confronted with every day. It is devastating to witness her, in her 100th year, believe that no progress has been made and that man's inhumanity to man remains as virulent as ever. Last week, on the anniversary of 7th of October, I was unable to leave my house. I had to witness every moment as it unfolded because it is all of our story. My greatest fear and profound disappointment is the harsh judgment and unknowing of who the Jewish people are and the rise in anti-Semitism that has resulted. Yet, I can also understand how this has exploded. The murder of thousands of innocent people is unacceptable, and it is without purpose or solution. Is this driven by the festering revenge of our 6 million dead? Revenge is what we witnessed by Hamas a year ago. And like a cancer, it has become malignant and spread into what is a bloodthirsty hatred that knows no bounds. It is a daily challenge to maintain libidinal energy, to not cower to the threat of those that seek to disempower, yet actively accepting the need for caution and not displaying outward signs of being a Jew. I have never before been self-conscious of my identity, despite my family history. I am now, but I refuse to be silenced. We are under intense scrutiny, and it is not a comfortable experience. I hear that there are many people in Germany who have made the decision to deny their Jewish identity post-1945. Understandable, but tragic that this caution bears weight. I am an ordinary Jew with an extraordinary legacy and responsibility. I am secular, but keenly attached to my identity and the traditions that are a bedrock of this. Has nothing to do with religion. My choice to come and live in Germany was to claim back that which was stolen from me. My bones belong here. And despite having experienced cultural dissonance and unconscious bias, I still feel, on a cellular level, that this is where my life should have been. On a cellular level, epigenetically, I think this is strong evidence that trauma is embodied internally, yet also finds expression in external life. It lives in the bricks. The dislocation I felt was always accompanied with a feeling of wrongness. I wondered what the purpose of my life was, other than being my mother's daughter, who is an impossible act to follow. I love her dearly, but have never won her approval in a way that is digestible for me or relatable for her, perhaps until I came to live here. This limited my creative capacity and in turn prevented me from knowing just how disempowered I was. Since returning to the country that was my stolen birthright, I have extended my repertoire. I have become an author and playwright, so life can begin at 60. I take risks and don't immediately fear death or need to ask my mother's permission. Our complex attachment has been informed by a deep separation anxiety and my terror of her ceasing to exist if I am not in her midst. This was her lived experience, unconsciously transferred to me. I think of my 60 years living in the wilderness of the United Kingdom as that of an extended refugee. I arrived here in Germany with the purpose of trying to find my unlived life. This is an act of empowerment. I have chosen it. The right to choose equals empowerment. Making the right choices are, of course, a different matter. We know that self-states can be a product of our environment, both pre- and post-birth. So much seems predestined, irrelevant of the efforts made by caregivers. Attachment theory, particularly the work of Bowlby and my personal hero, Donald Winnicott, teaches us that the mother's ability to intuit the needs of her infant and respond accordingly form the cornerstone of both the dynamic between the mother and child dyad, but the child's relational capacity, as separation and individuation typically occur. In simple language, which I'm a fan of, by the way, seems to me to suggest that if a mother's capacity to be present for her infant is impaired not through a lack of love, but as a result of heinous injury to her psyche, it is that is internalized by the child. The infant waits for its mother to do the ordinary, to be mirrored in a way that is consisted and ingested with the mother's milk. But if the milk is contaminated with death and despair, unconsciously nourishment is impaired. I was described by my mother as a baby that, although very sweet, made feeding impossible for my survivor mother. Apparently, I bit rather than suck. I don't think I have been forgiven thus far for this lack of graciousness. And so who is the victim? The suffering bitten mother, or the infant who has no capacity for organized intention, only primitive instinct? In other words, it wasn't my fault. This can take a lifetime to make sense of. However, it can also form the architecture of a precarious relating, the sense that the world is not a safe place, the world being that of the mother and child. A state of dysregulation is inevitable, as separation without terror of death, be it literal or psychic, underpin all separations. Of course, the world extends beyond the maternal couple, and the traumatized child has no skill in which to navigate beyond the binaries of good or bad, dead or alive paradigms. I have navigated this kind of internal world with varying degrees of success. It has required the utilization of both manic defenses and forced self-adaptations. These days, I occupy a perfectly imperfect sense of self. History has taught that for thousands of years, the Jewish people have been unsafe, wandering from place to place, having been expelled or murdered for simply existing. We also see that despite centuries of effort, we resist annihilation. Rather, we rebuild, regroup, repopulate, and thrive. This is resilience in action, and perhaps what we are most guilty of. I don't understand why or how hatred is so entrenched in the human psyche, and how winning or losing is calibrated by bloodshed. Yehuda Bauer prophetically said when asked if there could be another Holocaust, if it had not happened once, it couldn't happen again. But now, with precedent, anything is possible. The horror of the Holocaust is not that it deviated from human norms. The horror is that it didn't. What happened may happen again, not only to Jews, perpetrated by others. We are all possible victims, possible perpetrators, and possible bystanders. Fear is trauma's basic insult. It can render impotence in the face of terror. Yet there must never be a time when we fail to protest. When human life is endangered, national borders become irrelevant. When men or women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must become the center of the universe. Grief has no borders, nor does love and hate. And so it would seem to me that the only way to help ourselves is to help others and bear witness to each other's stories and pain. To be witnessed is the greatest gift of all. To not be seen, the greatest tragedy. Thank you.